information from it that would be valuable for their own startup.
Mm.
And that led, because I did the research on that, that was extensive, uh, 2 or 3 years, because my wife died in the middle of that,
Mhm.
Oliver Shalom. But it led to a lot of information about Hawaii, the Jews of Hawaii, and the history of Hawaii, and that led to Torah and Taro.
Great. Well, I didn't know that pop idol Bruno Mars, who I had the good fortune to see in concert, had a Jewish Ukrainian grandmother. I had no idea. I mean, how did you go about collecting all the information for your latest work, Torah and Taro, and just tell us just about what we find in the book.
Thank you. Well, what happened was, as I said, in researching the Honey and Poi book, I kept bumping into things. Of course, I had visited Hawaii many times with my wife during the late 20th century, so I was acquainted with such things as every other building being named Harry and Jeanette Weinberg and that sort of thing. And I said, wow, what a wonderful thing that Hawaii has, of all places, Hawaii has a Jewish name on many buildings. And I thought that was a terrific thing. And then when I got into Honey and Poi, of course, I kept bumping into things like ex a survivor, a Holocaust survivor named Risa Whiting, who was in Maui and who was who did extensive things with Maui theater and music and became an actress, etc. And I said, wow, it's inspirational to find all these people where you wouldn't expect to find them, or I didn't expect to find them. And they kept piling up on me until finally I said, I got to do something with this or else they may be forgotten. And I didn't want anybody to be forgotten who had made a contribution to the betterment of our wonderful state that I adopted as my own.
Mm. And you said that there's Jewish influences going all the way back to the time of Kamehameha the First, right?
Oh, well, I even,
Maybe before. Yeah.
that's right. The Jewish influence, there was great Jewish influence in terms of the missionaries and the monarchs. And there are some fun stories that we can share on the way. All the way back to what was referred to by one of the missionary people. Well, he was actually a merchant person, Elias Townsend, who called one of the Kamehameha's subordinates the Jew cook. And that's the first reference to that's the first Jewish reference, I believe, in Hawaiian history, although I haven't studied that much. I don't know Hawaiian, so I couldn't study it in the original language. But the Jew cook, and I took that up, and I spoke to botanist Ron, what's her name, Bloom, who told me that she had done some research on a person named Don Federico de Palamarin, who she suspected had come here and had become part of the monarchy or assistant in the monarchy and was Jewish. And so that gave me an interesting kind of entree into the very beginning of the Hawaiian Islands.
Do you have any definitive proof that Kamehameha the First ever tried gefilte fish? Is that what you're telling me? Is that not?
I don't think so. He didn't like to mix his fish. So I want to, first of all, kudos to you, Rabbi. Thank you for your leadership in revitalizing and repairing the Jewish community here. I am very appreciative of what you've done, and I wish you the very best. I know you're working very hard because I could never get in touch with you when I wanted to.
Well, thank you, Matt.
I appreciate that. And I do want to tell people I will be talking a lot. I wrote the book, so I'm going to talk a lot. But I want to be interrupted. I want you to tell me what any embellishment you can make on any of the stories we give. Any corrections you want to give, I'll be happy to have those. I'd be happy to have an interaction with you. So whatever I can go. I have 3 pages here of information that I'm going to share with you. But if you wish to add, you may have known some of the people in the recent years of whom I have written. And if you do know them and can embellish whatever I say, I would appreciate hearing from you.
And if you raise your hand or use the chat box, Stephanie is just very vigilant, and she'll uh, bring my attention to you have a question, or I'll see your question. But are there any trends, Matt, that you notice in terms of um, Jewish people and their influence on or contributions to Hawaii? Was there anything that kind of
Oh yeah, it's becoming well, as the hardest thing to do was to determine what actually the Hawaiian population, Jewish population was.
Mhm,
I mean, we have the unofficial estimates were almost as good as the official estimates.
mhm,
The one that we have now that is most official came out of the American Jewish Yearbook,
mhm,
which was that it's 0.5% of the Hawaiian population, which puts it around 7 to 8,000.
mm,
Most of the unofficial, but that's an estimate that comes. I'm not sure the basis of it,
mhm,
but it is actually in print. So that's an official. I call that an official estimate. But when I speak to people, they usually come up with between 0.5 and 1% of the Hawaiian population, which
mm,
would put it about 10 to 12,000, 10 to 15,000, someplace in there. In any case, the ratio is very small and the accomplishments are very large and extensive. So I make a big deal out of the fact that we have outproportioned ourselves in making significant contributions, being part of the government, being part of the business community, politics. It is extensive. The only things I was disappointed, and someone may correct me on this, I couldn't find a large number of CPAs and bankers, which I expected to find. And I checked with some of the CPAs I know, and the number was very small. So I think for some reason the Asian community has captured, and perhaps the old line Protestants have captured the banking and CPA community.
mm.
So that was the only thing that, but lawyers, doctors, professionals, politicians, many leaders.
And how welcoming was the non-Jewish community that was impacted by the work of these
Yeah,
officials?
it's an interesting thing. Hawaii was very welcoming and encouraging, and I have dedicated the book to the Hawaiian society, which enabled them to do so. I'm not sure that was because they were so great about Jews, but at first there were so few of them, and there was a German connection. There was a lot of German people here, and part of them, the German connection, did keep them together for a while,
Mhm.
and so the numbers far exceed your expectations, and the welcoming of the community. Um, the missionaries were so fixed on trying to convert the Hawaiians that they didn't pay much attention to what was happening in the Jewish community. And the Jewish people were just started on the outside, just glad that no one was bothering them and they were able to pursue things. And then when the big five took over, which was from 1900 to to the 50s, um, they were glad to have the service industry which Jewish people provided.
Can you talk about a little more about when you say Big Five? Can you just sort of define that for everybody?
Yeah, it's interesting. The Big Five, for those who know Hawaiian history, this may be short for you, but
Mhm,
uh, the Big Five were a group of five industrial financial complexes that really were an oligarchy and really ran the political and the business systems of Hawaii. And people would have to, participate in what, as Eddie Sherman, who was a Jewish journalist, said, the two parties were, one was the oligarchy, the Big Five, and the other one was anybody the Big Five would allow to run. So they
Thank you.
captured the political system. Jews were outside of that system. They were not part of it, although they were, as I said, providing service to that group
mhm.
by virtue of employment groups and by virtue of communications and transportation matters.
So I imagine that the majority of Jewish people who made these contributions to life in Hawaii didn't start out in Hawaii. That they something brought them here. Could
Yeah,
you talk a
well,
little bit about what are some of the factors that you found that are common themes
yeah.
in there?
Very early on, we're talking about when the Jews, I call it Jews trickle in, and that began in 1850. And the reason that happened was the events in Europe. It's interesting how one thing, as they say, one thing leads to another. So here I am back in Europe in Barentsburg, I think. I could look it up, but I'm not sure the name of the community, Dresden, I think. And they were, the Jews had gone to Germany because Germany had a very liberal period between 1840 and 1850 or 1848. And then there was a reversal of that period. The autocrats took over again, and so the Jews were again persecuted. So they started to debark for America. They came into the eastern seaboard, and then they made their way across from east to California, and then made their way across to Hawaii, because Hawaii was then in the sugar industry, had tariffs removed, and that gave a sort of a spurt to the economy. So, the Jews were looking for places where they could make a living, as we say. And so they came to Hawaii, not in great numbers, but I have the one statistic I do have that seems to be accurate. In about 1870, there were 84 Jews in Hawaii, and they were merchants, mostly merchants, dry goods stores, hardware stores, and that sort of thing. And they were, once again, on the periphery, but providing a very valuable service to Hawaii.
So did a number of those achievers come out of those families, or did some that were doing, the dry goods and business at the time, the small number of Jewish families? What led to these?
Let me expand a little bit. I hope it's
Yeah,
not boring for people.
not to-
The German Jews who came here were mostly converts to Lutheranism. So if you look up, and they even had baptismal places. Now, I want to first, let me just go step back and say, I'm indebted to Kirk Kashmir, because he wrote the book that was very informative for that period. He wrote a book about the beginning of Hawaiian Jewry, and he brought it up, a draft up to 1940. And I often went to that book for the beginning of my own research, which took me into the state archives and to the bottom tiers of the library. But Kirk, without Kirk, I wouldn't be able to fill in many of the gaps that I was able to fill in because of his work. So what happened, he did not, now this is my assumption, not his, but why were there so many German Jews coming here? Well, I mentioned that they were now being persecuted in Europe because of a anti-revolution movement, but also they had found, as Karl Marx did and his father, that if they were Lutheran, they could make better advances in business and in professions. So there were many, many Jews who converted in Europe and came here and claimed they were Lutheran. But for instance, there was a guy named Hackfeld, and he established a business that brought many other Jews to Hawaii. And then he went back to Germany. But my assumption, my investigation has indicated that he was one of those who became Lutheran in order to make the trip here, in order to get permission to leave and to take goods with him.
So once they arrived here, these Jews that in some cases were baptized, you said, did they engage with the Jewish community at all in a religious sense, or not really?
No, as I say, I call this section Jews trickle in.
Okay.
There was no collectivity of Jews. They tried a burial society, but it didn't work. There was a lot. I don't know if you know the German Jews, and now because there were so many recent people coming to Germany and then leaving for America, many of them were Galatian Jews, from Poland and Lithuania. And for the most part, the German Jews did not see them as equals.
Mm.
I think that's the only way I can say it.
Okay.
And so there was no collectivity. There was no effort to start a show. There was no effort to start. The only thing they did try to start was a burial society.
Mm. Okay. Well,
So the Jews did not. The Jews moved. The Germans and the German Jews got together,
mhm.
and the other Jews were busy working in both in the plantations. They worked as bookkeepers, etc., and in the profession and in the immersion
Wow.
world.
Huh. So would you say that Jews were integrated into a great deal of aspects of life in Hawaii? As you said, plantation life, everything. Was there?
No, they were not leaders. They were not leaders of this. They were sort of here,
Mhm.
and the thing that happened, Rabbi, was that as soon as the economic conditions got bad, and there were certain times when the tariffs were removed or the tariffs were installed, that the economic conditions got back, or they received a lot of competition from the Asian communities that were coming in at that point. They went back. They left. They went south. They went on either they went on to the Pacific Islands further, or they went back to California.
Ah, interesting. Yeah.
Now, there's one character I do want to
Yeah,
mention, and
please go ahead.
you know of him, Elias Rosenberg.
Oh yes, please
I
tell
couldn't
everybody.
find out enough about him, but he was quite a character. He would read from the Torah to King Kalakaua, and the king was very, very enchanted by it. He made him the customs agent. He liked him so much. And they called him Holy Moses. And so there was a lot of fun in doing this, reading about Holy Moses, and that was both a derogatory and an plaudit of his akudo toward him. The Holy Moses was a good thing and a bad thing at the same time. It depended on how you looked at Rosenberg.
That's great. Well,
And you
yeah,
have his, you know that you have his, or of course you know,
yes.
but others may not know that his Torah, the Torah he brought to Kalakaua, and which was used for a number of reasons, a number of seasons
Yeah.
by the Jews at festivities when they started to get together,
Mhm.
uh, is in the
Yes, we have.
temple.
Right. Thank you. So, Matt, you said you have a number of these stories about different figures in Hawaiian contributions to Hawaii who were Jewish. So, can you share a couple more stories? You said you had
Sure,
some characters, figures you came across
well,
in other fields too.
yeah, I mentioned Don Francisco de Palamarin,
Hmm.
uh, who was a botanist, and he was the Jew cook. And he filled in a big gap for me. I suggested, and my research circumstantially supports, but it is still a question, that he was a crypto Jew, that he had come here from the area of Spain in which there was a large population of Jewish people, although he had Baptist papers and he claimed to be Catholic. There were a lot, and it was interesting enough to find out that it was in the area that Moses Maimonides was born, and where his yeshiva was. So it was a wonderful fill-in for me, because I needed some kind of a Jewish person who was effective in the early part of the 19th century.
Mm.
Um, so now the other one I wanted to talk about particularly,
Mhm.
who inspired me to write this book, was reading about Alfred Priest.
I was just going to ask you about him. That's so funny. Go,
He
please.
was, he was an amazing person. He had actually converted to Catholicism in 1936, and the suggestion is he came from a Jewish, rich, traditional Jewish family, and then he converted to Catholicism. My guess is in 1936 that was one of his ways out. But he came here, and he uh, worked in an architectural firm, and then he, of course, was chosen. And I haven't been able to get to the Navy records. I hope to do that, to find out why he was chosen to build the Arizona Memorial.
Mhm.
And my supposition is that he used many of the temple references in building the Arizona Memorial. And if one goes there, they can see the Tree of Life, which is both in the visitor center, and it connects to the sanctuary at the Arizona Memorial, where the names of the those who were killed or died on December 7th are. So he was another interesting person. I could go through, there was another one that was important. And I'm looking at past people. Many of you will know, I'll read some of the names of, and ask you to say anything, anybody who has any information about him.
Mhm.
One of the other people who was important was a man named Paul Newman. And he was part of the annexation. He was part of King Kalakaua and Queen Kamehameha Manu's contingent. And she was very important. Of course, she was she very much objected to the annexation.
Mhm.
And then when it occurred, he got her a pension that enabled her to do a lot of things for the Hawaiian community and to continue many Hawaiian cultural practices.
Mhm.
So by his work with getting her a pension so she could live, and she lived in the Atlanta Palace, she was able to keep music going, and ukuleles adopted by Hawaiians, and many other things that were important to what they had a sort of Hawaiian Renaissance at the time. And then when the Hawaiian Renaissance was reignited in the 70s, many of the things that she had preserved were prominent in it.
Nice, nice.
So that his name was Paul Newman.
Okay.
Another one who denied that he was Jewish, but who was Jewish. That one of the hardest things to do, of course, was to trace people in an effort to determine that. I had one experience. We all know Randall Roth, and I thought that Randall Roth seems to me a Jewish name, but I wrote to him and he said no, he was Catholic all the way back to 2,000 years. So as you can imagine, much of my time was spent asking people, seeking information about their heritage. And my definition of a person of Jewish heritage was the one they use in Israel for the most part, although it does get complicated, which was one grandparent Jewish.
Okay.
That's how Bruno Mars made the list.
Well, using that criteria, what things surprised you about what you discovered with the relationship between Jews and Hawaii? What things popped up that you weren't expecting, or were there?
No, I wasn't. Well, when I wrote the book, I had in my mind that they had made a great contribution. And then by the further I investigated, the more numbers came forward. So no, I wasn't surprised. My thesis is that Jewish people, if they're enabled, because of their heritage and because of their values, and because, and I'll give you a little insight into it. They will rise to the top. I have that as a belief that unless they are restricted and constricted, that their contribution to the host society, and they're very experienced in being guests in the host society, or strangers as it were, they will make a great contribution. It's only when they're persecuted and denied that they're limited. So the first thing the reasons I wrote the book, I have it here. When I contacted people, many of them asked me, well, what is this all about? They didn't know I was doing, and they didn't know me. So I penned a letter that I sent to those who did ask about it. Many didn't. Many just said, oh, it's wonderful. But one is that I said that the reasons I want to write this book for Hawaii are numerous. A few of them are, Jews have an obligation to be in light to the communities in which they live. I hope to show how people of Jewish heritage have influenced and contributed to Hawaii since they arrived in 1850. Then, although anti-Semitism is not as well spread in Hawaii as elsewhere, there have been incidents. My opinion, the best way to fight anti-Semitism is to remind people, including Jews themselves, of the positive things that Jews do. And then one person accused me of segregating Jews from the society. I said, far from segregating people of Jewish heritage, my book will show how Jews are woven into the very fabric of Hawaii. There are very few fields of endeavor in which they have not provided leadership well out of proportion to their numbers in the population. And the final thing I said, I've had me so much fun, I'm not going to stop. Why don't I do this? While I have this captive audience,
Yeah.
I'll read some names of the people of recent years.
Mm-hmm.
Did anybody on the group know Harry Weinberg by any chance?
I believe we have one. I'm going to unmute Glenn Weinberg, if you don't mind.
Good.
Wait, hold on. Let me see if I can get Glenn. Okay, Glenn, please. Oh, wait, just walked away. Oh, he's getting something. Hold on. Glenn, you can unmute. Wait, hold on. Glenn, if you could unmute yourself. There you
I
go.
just did it. You hear me?
Yes, we got you. Go ahead. And Matt's on as well.
Harry.
Yeah, so Uncle Harry was my father's brother, and there's a lot to talk about, but I don't want to spend a lot of time unless there are particular questions I could answer.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing of interest in Baltimore, within a year before he died, he was doing business and sitting in his chair in Baltimore. I said, Uncle Harry, why are you working so hard? And he literally took out $1 and said, I'm working to earn $1 and I'm going to, make a fortune and give it all away. That's what he told me within the last year of his life, which is what he did.
Glenn,
Yeah. Good, Matt.
did he ever? Did you ever hear the story about how a young, a 15-year-old in a boys' club in Hawaii was walking out to the basketball court, and he met one of the trustees, and he said, I don't know exactly what page it's on, so I'll tell it. So he said, well, we owe it all to Harry Weinberg. And the young man said, well, who's Harry Weinberg? He said, well, he was a guy who took from the rich and gave it to us. And the young man said, cool. And he walked, he walked out to the basketball court at the Boys and Girls Club that was named for your uncle.
Never heard that story.
What a great embodiment of the legacy of your uncle, Glenn. And would you say, Matt, that's a common theme too? That Jews contributed to life in Hawaii, not only by the work that they did, but also philanthropically, that they gave of the resources they had or earned?
Yes, very much so. I mean, even Weinberg's stipulations within his trust are that 50% should go to Hawaiian things, 25% should go to Jewish things, and 25% should be for the public welfare. And that's reflected in many of the gifts that come from Jewish people to Hawaii. It's really very, very lovely.
I think I have a correction to that. It's 25% has to go to Jewish, 25% cannot go to Jewish, and 50% can go to anything. There's no focus on Hawaii in that 50%, is my understanding from hearing that a number of times.
Maybe it's been changed, Glenn. I had or maybe I made a mistake. I don't know. But it was, he did deliberately want to help Hawaiian. He didn't want to help elite institutions.
Yeah, he didn't want to help schools and the theater. He said the rich people can take care of theaters and those type of things.
Yeah.
And that really goes, Matt, with what you're talking about, the theme of Jews not being necessarily in the, as you said, the oligarchy before, the one percenters of their time. And so maybe that plays right into that theme.
Now, recently, they have become benefactors of the Hawaiian theater and things that are hot and things like that. So recently, they've become very much more involved in that.
I could tell you that's not because of Uncle Harry. He would not have permitted it. But
no, none of his money's going. Yeah.
No, but there's no doubt that Glenn, that the Weinberg name is very much inextricably woven to life in Hawaii then and now, and in just wondrous ways. So
I just want to do I do want to talk a minute about the labor movement.
Okay. Before you do that, can I sneak in one question? And thank you, Glenn. Thank you. And Matt, I think you and Glenn should get together and write.
Lovely.
Just the Weinberg book alone would take up volumes. But thank you, Glenn. I have a question, Matt. Someone wants to know how they can learn more about the Jewish Burial Society that you referred to in the late 1800s in Hawaii. Are there ways that one could do that?
Yeah, if they send me an email, let me give you my email.
Okay.
I'll send them all the information I have.
Please.
The email is newmat78, NEWMAT 78
Okay.
@gmail.com.
Okay, and I'll put that on the chat box too as well. Thank you so
Anybody
much.
who I'd be glad to hear from anybody who wishes to
Okay,
interact.
that would be terrific. I'm sorry I interrupted you. You're saying, Matt?
Okay, Glenn, I think I'm going to come back to you. I don't have any immediate questions, but if I do have any before we end, I'll get to you. Well, the labor movement was important in 2 or 3 ways. One is that it did start. It assisted the well, you know, as you remember, as you probably know, there were waves of immigrants coming in.
Mhm.
And what the Big Five would do, they owned the plantations and the plantation land. They would, if one group gave them a little trouble, or if there was like a Chinese exclusive act, which there was in 1875, they couldn't use the Chinese laborers anymore. So then they would go to Portugal, or they would go to the Philippines, and they would bring in a new wave of people to substitute for them. As I put in the book, the one thing they never thought about was giving the people more money that they were using, but they wanted to keep the wages down, so they would bring in a whole new things. So the labor movement, so there were strikes from 1875 to 1930s. There were strikes, but they were always sort of wildcat. They weren't organized. They weren't developed correctly. They weren't emphatic enough, and they weren't extensive enough. But then came a guy named Jack Hall. Jack Hall was the labor leader of the 30s, and he came here, and the man named Max Wertheimer hired him to be a union organizer. And he became the most important union organizer of the time, and this was the late 30s. But even he didn't have enough skill to utilize all the laws that were being passed by the Roosevelt administration that would assist labor. So he had to depend on the mainland unions, the CIO and the AFL, to help him. The only help he had was from Avram Rottleider, who you knew as what's his name, Larry? Oh darn!
Wasn't Bridges, was it?
No, Bridges was the one who was in. That's interesting. Why I forget that one? He's so important too. Well, I won't be able to. Rutledge, Arthur Rutledge. His real name was Avram Rottleider. So there was a Jewish guy, and he came here. Why I would forget that, I don't know. And he and Hall organized all these ethnic groups, the Filipinos, but particularly the Japanese, who were now in positions of authority, of some power. So they organized the strikes of the right after the war, the pineapple strike and the sugar strike, and that broke the back of the oligarchy. And that eventually broke the back of the oligarchy, so that the Big Five diminished in its importance. And that's when the Democratic Party movement began, which we all are acquainted with. The other name that's very important there is Chaplin. He was some of you may know him. Who knows Chaplin? George Chaplin, the editor of the Advertiser. He was the editor of the Advertiser, and he became the spokesperson for the Democratic Party and its ascendancy in Hawaii. So the labor movement and the newspaper combined to break the back of the Big Five in Hawaii. And Chaplin was Jewish, very active in the Jewish community. And Jack Hall surrounded himself with what I call a Jewish brain trust. And that was Rutledge, whose name was Rottleider, really. And he came from Galatia. And the other one was Rutledge and...
So Matt, you could say that Jews really were major contributors to what life we know now, which is unionization Democratic Party all started, where the seeds were planted, you could say, by people like Rutledge.
Yes, I don't want to. I don't want to. I do want to overstate it because it is really, the significance of it is immense. And as a matter of fact, there were not many acts of anti-Semitism in Hawaii that I could find, but one of them was a businessman who said, "Why are all these?" No, he said, "No, we should take all the Jews out and shoot them." He was one of those who was part of the old establishment, and the other one was. It's not coming to mind, so I don't want to delay.
That's okay. I want to get some time for questions in here, and I believe we have someone on the phone. I think, Betsy, did you have a question? I think you're unmuted. Did you have a question for Matt?
Am I on the?
Yes, go ahead.
Oh,
go right
no,
ahead,
no.
please.
I guess, no, I just kind of like to hear all the information and have questions at the end. But I did meet George Chaplin, by the way, and I know a lawyer, I can't remember, well, Roger Epstein worked for a big law firm that was run by Jewish people. I can't remember the name of it, but Roger would be a good person to get in touch with to learn more about George Chaplin. But I did meet him.
Thank you.
A wonderful person. And I will try very much to get Roger in touch with you. But I'm on the phone. Could you just well, I guess you'll email your email so I can.
Oh,
do you know Roger Epstein?
It's Matt. I can make that introduction.
Okay.
I just emailed with him this morning. But there's another question, Matt. Were any Jews involved in the Massey affair? If you could describe
no, that's one of those things they skirted. Yeah, the Massey affair. I did look at that. No.
Can you talk about it, actually, so people don't know or not familiar with it?
All right, well, I'll give you, it's not my, okay.
Just a thumbnail.
A woman was raped. A woman was raped in 1933.
Mm-hmm.
A woman was raped, and there were certain accusations against Hawaiian people, men. Mm-hmm. The trial came up. Oh no, they were put in jail, and the woman's mother organized, I think, a brother-in-law and another person, and they went and killed the person who was accused of being the rapist. And then later on, as I recall, she was accused of that, and she came up for trial, but she was not convicted. So it was a really terrible affair of racial prejudice, etc. So that's, but I looked and looked and looked, Ken, and I couldn't find any Jewish. There were no Jewish lawyers involved, as far as I remember, and there was no Jewish judge or anything of that sort. So,
all right, thank you.
We have our share of wonderful Jewish judges,
yes,
the Levins, etc. So,
yeah. Well, Matt, I want to get a question from Larry Steinberg. Go ahead, Larry. I think you're.
Hey there, Matt.
Hey, Larry.
Strange you should mention a judge. The middle of last week, I sent out some information on Alfred Price. And some of what I had found was he Jewish family, married a Catholic woman, very attractive is what attracted him. About 1936, it didn't look like he converted until he had to get out of, after the Anschluss, he had to get out of Austria.
Right.
And he had a contact in the Catholic Church that got him passports to get to the United States. What I found in going through there was Judge Levinson of our congregation had organized something in 1950 when it was still the congregation of the Honolulu Jewish community. And he had Price design a synagogue in 1950. And Price, did the artist layout for it. At that point, they decided to switch into Temple Emmanuel. So they changed the name, they changed the board, and they bought that big building on Oahu Avenue by the university. Do you know if there was any secret handshake that went on between Judge Levinson and Price? Did you find any connection there?
Bernard Levinson, yeah,
Mhm.
Bernard Levinson. You're talking about
Yes.
Bernard,
Yes.
yeah. A secret handshake to what? To that he would use?
Yeah, a Judaism connection, even though he was a professed Catholic.
Yeah.
What was
Well,
what
as I
attracted?
say, he was not an active in the Jewish community, but
Right?
he did have the background, and he used that background in many instances. And I think he particularly used it in the design of the memorial, and I
Yes.
specify that in the book. But I'm sorry that what you've just said is new to me. I didn't know that he was the designer of a temple in Hawaii, in Honolulu.
Yeah,
I
it
think-
was too small. They wandered into an option on this huge abandoned school,
Uh-huh.
Oahu Avenue. So they bought that instead and consecrated it. And when they finally outgrew that in the late 50s, they had Ed Solomon come in,
Yeah.
and
I
Ed
did speak to
designed
Ed,
the
that
present
was-
building.
Very good. Thank you, Larry. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. Thank you.
I will be investigating that. If I find anything out, I'll share it with you, Larry.
That's great. You can do that. No worries. So anyone else I want to invite to either post a chat question or raise your hand or wave your hand, and Matt will be happy to
I
comment
see
on any.
there are some chats. Should I check the chats?
Yeah, I covered those chat right now, but anybody else have a question they want to
Oh, all right.
pose to our guest or comment or anything, you can wave at me if you're on video, or just use the chat box or raise hand. Okay. Oh, Sandy Armstrong. Okay, hang on. I'll get to you. Hold on. Here we go. Okay, Sandy, please go ahead.
This is a moment of pure, absolute joy to have these, to have Matt come on, and all of us here in the Jewish community to experience Matt and what he's accomplished. It's a Shechianu moment. So if we haven't said Shechianu yet, may we say it now, Rabbi?
Go right ahead, Sandy. I'll do it with you. Go ahead.
Okay.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shechianu kiyamanu v'higianu lazman hazeh. Blessed are you, Lord our God, sovereign of the universe, who has kept us in life, sustained us, and brought us to this wonderful moment that we get to share together with
Thank you, Sandy.
an esteemed author. One thing, we have a very literate Jewish community in Hawaii. And Sandy, any other comment or question for Matt? All right. If not, I want to say, Matt,
Just the pride.
Ken, how can we get the book?
oh, okay.
Matt?
Yes. So Matt, I was just going to get that question. Thank you, Judy. How can people get this wonderful work, Torah and Taro, Jewish Customs
Yeah.
in Hawaii? What are some of the ways they can go about purchasing?
Most of you are on Amazon. You can certainly get it through Amazon.
Whew, yeah.
You can also get it at Ex Libris, xlibris.com, books/books, and they have copies there too. So that's the easiest way to do it. Thank you very much for asking.
And it's available in hardcover or softcover as well. I believe also Barnes and Noble, you can order through them as well.
Yeah, Barnes and Noble is there too. Yeah.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Do you think a lot of what the contributions of Jews to life in Hawaii fall in line with one of the most repeated commandments in the Torah, which is do not mistreat the stranger or the other because you were a stranger in the land of Egypt? Do you get that sense in terms of?
Yes, thank you, Ken. That works both ways.
Mhm.
We know how to be strangers, so we're not always mixing in where we're not supposed to be. I found,
Mhm.
and we are appreciative of being the strangers we deal with. So we are gracious to the host culture. I mean, I always feel that there's a certain element of, because Jews have been pushed around so long, that when we get to a place that actually accepts us, we're very grateful to it, and we don't want to abuse what we're involved with.
Right.
So I do feel that way. I believe that the historical reference does give us a certain panache in dealing with being a guest in another host society.
Mm.
Although now we are very much woven into it. I mean, there were, as I said, there were anti-Semitic incidents, which I do deal with in the book,
Mhm.
but they were, I mean, very small compared to many others.
Yeah. I think that falls in line with things. I think Michael Fisher would like to talk. So Michael, I'm going to unmute you. And let's see. Away we go. Teams. Okay, great. All right, Michael, if you can unmute, you're on.
Yeah. Okay. Uh, there's a whole lot of evidence you've been offering us that testify to the similarity between the meaning of aloha and when we hold up a glass of wine, we say l'chaim.
Uh-huh.
Both are testaments and you might say love of life itself, all the aspects of life. And I think, and I hope in your book, you've mentioned the connection that Jews can bring to all of the life, wherever they live, that comes from being Jewish, that comes from the love of life, the respect, the love of God, the gratitude, the sense of wonder, the sense of humor, the sense of respect for different people and all people as part of being Jewish. And I wonder in these closing moments, if you could take a few strands from all of your experience with all of this to make a connection. Not only are we accepted here, but when I first came here, I wanted to get away from New York and the Bronx and all that. And I realized after several years of asking myself, why am I here? Why did I come here? The details don't matter. I didn't come here alone. But I finally realized I belong here because aloha is part of my way of life. So if you could sort of make a connection and weave these together a little bit, it gives a lot of substance, I think, to what Jews do wherever they are.
Thank you, Michael. I think that makes a lot of sense. Matt, what do you say?
Michael, I've taken all the notes, so be careful. In my next book, your words are going to come floating back to you. I'll give you credit, okay?
Got to pay residual royalties, my friend, but that's okay. Thank you.
Precisely why I say in one of my sections, this is a love letter to Hawaii. The whole book is really a love letter to Hawaii. It's to congratulate Hawaii on being what it is, in spite of many trials and tribulations during its history. But what has developed is so good, particularly so good for us Jews, that I do want it to be a love letter. And in my dedication, I say, if I may just share it, if I can find it.
Do you want me to share it?
Yeah.
Okay. Dedicated to the men, women, individuals, and families of Jewish heritage who contributed to making Hawaii a better place, and to Hawaiians and the aloha spirit, which enabled them to do so.
So thank you, Michael. That was wonderful.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. Matt, I wanted to ask you. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I just want to say that we have gotten through about 1/10 of the book. So we'll
have to have you back.
Sorry if I talk too much, but
that's okay.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, just real quick. The visitor industry is so important to life in Hawaii and has been so for a while. Can you talk about any Jews within the history of tourism and the visitor community, hotels and whatnot?
I will. How about Joel Cohen?
Please.
Whenever you went to, who's Joel Cohen, you might say? You know Consolidated Amusement Theaters?
Yes.
Larry will know.
Uh-huh.
And he started that, and he was one of the sponsors of the Royal Hawaiian Band. And here he was in the middle of the turn of the century, and he created the theater industry and the film industry in Hawaii, and did such a wonderful job with it. So entertainment. How about all the sports? We have a lot of sports writers. We have a lot of. I mentioned Eddie Sherman before, but there were many other writers. I can't mention them all because I can't remember them all. But if they're in the book, so to speak.
Now we have a Jewish men's basketball coach for UH. So
that's right.
Matt, I have a question come in on chat. Any thoughts about the owner of Lanai, the gentleman who, Mr. Ellison?
Well, he has proven himself to be very beneficial to that island,
Mhm.
particularly during the epidemic or the pandemic we're going through. He has made many contributions. He does own an island, so I guess he can do that. But
Right.
he has not held back in
Hmm.
the sense that he didn't use it as an excuse not to do what his responsibility was in owning an island. He
Mhm.
made it as well as fine as far as he could for the people on the island.
Right.
He was he's a very admirable island owner, if you will.
Yeah,
I don't know
We
many, but yes, I say he's
all,
definitely,
we
yes.
all own an island and do as much as he does. We'll be very good for the world.
yeah. Cohen came with the cutting edge of entertainment. Started out with the vaudeville,
Did he? Yeah, here, yeah,
opened the vaudeville theaters, and then converted to silent films.
yeah.
Mm.
He went right through, and then I don't know well. How about the triathlon we like so much? Then if I say kosher kills, who knows what I'm talking about? Anybody out there?
Oh,
We had a wonderful Israeli volleyball player
oh,
who really transitioned the volleyball system here. The highest number of people attending, the highest number of victories,
mhm.
entering the NCAA tournament. His name was Yuval.
Oh,
Something.
Yuval Katz. Yuval
Yeah.
Katz. Yeah, yeah, exactly.
So there are no fields that didn't touch upon, as I say, except CPAs and bankers. For some reason.
Shocking, shocking. Well, so
Anybody
Matt,
else, let me know.
I just last call for questions or comments, folks. Anybody want to have a word? And Matt, you've given me hope that we could actually host an adult bar mitzvah for Bruno Mars. So that's something I'm really excited at the prospect of doing. I don't know if the beam would fit all his dance moves and his background singers, but that would be
Very good, Ken.
really
I
amazing. I would love
I
that.
like your initiative.
I would love that. But
Can you speak,
yeah,
can you
please.
speak about Jewish women?
Oh, Jewish women,
Oh,
women. How were women prominent?
God bless the Jewish women. I could read all the names I have of them.
Give us a couple that stand out to you.
How about Denise Kaufman? Well, our own Judy Lind. Let's talk
Yes.
about her for a minute. She's in there. Marlene Booth. But the ones I really like, we know about Judy and Marlene, and we appreciate them.
Mhm.
But Denise Kaufman in Kauai, she was a discovery of mine through Dan Bender, and she was the one who started the very prestigious private school in Kauai that many people go to. And Larry, do you know her? The name of the school? I could look it up, but it's in here. And she was one of the five. They call them the five mothers of the six mothers of this school. Seven. 4 Jewish women and 3 non-Jewish started a private school, and it has been, it's been a very excellent alternative to the public school system in Kauai. So Denise Kaufman, I could read some more. I have a lot. It's almost equal. Believe me, the women have been marvelous.
Oh, that's good to know. Well, Matt, I could listen to you. We could listen to you all day, but I want everybody to read the book and go get it and read the book. And I'm glad that Charlotte is online, so that God willing, sooner than later, when we're able to open up again here at the library, that we could have a copy here for people to read. But just in closing, what would you want for people to take away from reading Torah and Taro? What would you really want them to come away with?
The reason I called it Torah and Taro is because we're on the shoulders of many people who have gone before us. And we must be appreciative of the kind of things that they've passed to us, the things that they went through so we could be born, though we can be existing. And we must understand that it's always our obligation to make the world a better place as we interact with it.
And speaking of that, did you include Mama Linser? Someone mentioned the chat
Yes,
box.
she's in there. Thank you. She
What
was
is
very
she?
important in the 1920s when the Jewish community was just forming, and we had emissaries from the mainland coming, helping us. And in the 1970s, we had emissaries from Israel helping us.
Wow, that's great. Well, the beautiful thing, Matt and everybody, is that for all the stories in Matt's book, that the entire book hasn't been written yet, that there's still more chapters to add. And I look at the faces and the names that in front of me, and I think how that still today, every day, and into the future, members of our Jewish community will continue to make significant contributions to life here in the beautiful place we get to call home. And so, Matt, I can't thank you enough for doing this this mitzvah of making people aware of our story. And I hope that everyone will go out and get Torah and Taro, and then we'll get a copy eventually as well here at Temple. And I can't wait to continue the conversation. And we have so many more chapters, as you and Glenn showed us. You know, the Weinberg contributions of the Weinberg family alone could take up a good amount of chapters and pages. So with that, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. And Matt, mazel tov on your work, and may you continue writing. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
All right. And stay well, everybody, and we'll tell you about more guests in the future. Thank you, everyone. Shavua tov. Have a good week.
Matt,